Welcome to Unregulated Leadership. We are your hosts, Lavanya Douglas
and Latoya Johnson, and we're all in. Except you may notice that Ashley is missing. Know that Ashley is well, but she's decided to pursue other opportunities. You may see her later on in the season as a guest host or as a guest, but know that she is well. Today's guest is Gifty Ampaw. Is that right?
Ampaw. It's okay.
And Gifty, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you both for having me here.
Awesome. So we wanted to talk to you because you had an amazing research topic for your DP, but also because your experience throughout the William James Leadership Psychology program has been like super interesting and quite unique. So first, tell folks about yourself. You are mother, wife, small children, and in a doctoral program, just begging for pain.
Yes. So hi everyone. As I previously stated, my name is Gifty. I had just graduated from William James College in the Leadership Psychology program as of last month, I would say. Yes. So prior to me in the program, I am a board certified behavior analyst and a licensed applied behavior analyst in the state of Massachusetts. So what that is I just pretty much deal with behavior management. I deal with children and youth and young adults who mostly are on the spectrum or have other, mental health challenges. So maybe like ADHD, and I just, do treatment plans, behavior plans. So yeah, all that fun stuff. And I am a mother of 4 children. My oldest is going to be 11 in 3 weeks. And I have 3 boys. So 1 girl, 3 boys. My boys are 8, 6, and 3. And I've been married for 10 years, but actually 11 years. And been with my husband for 16 going on 17 years. I'm just, I guess you can say, a very busybody all around, but I love what I do professionally. I love, having a big family, and yeah, it does have its challenges, but I enjoy it.
I love that. Sounds like you're a busy lady. Okay.
Yes.
So why did you choose leadership psychology as someone with a clinical background?
That's a very interesting question. Initially, I was actually going to pursue the clinical psychology program. And I just realized that I no longer just wanted to have a clinical background, but I wanted to really look more into the organizational lens. And I just wanted to really see how I can merge both fields, organizational psychology and clinical psychology. So I work predominantly in the ABA field, which is applied behavior analysis. And we have a specific, subseparate from ABA, which is called OBM, which is organizational behavior management. So think of it of, organizational psychology or industrial organizational psychology, but in a more master's level. So they're really looking at the organization, how employees adapt within the organization, work performance, how can they increase all forms of work performance. And I wanted to really do that in a more doctorate level because I was really interested in OBM. So I figured, why not just go through that route instead? So I've always been interested in OBM. So I just took that, and I guess in a more doctorate level.
And how would you say your clinical experience, your knowledge and history impacts your organizational development work? Because you primarily work with kids in your clinical role, and I'm assuming that you're working with more adults in your OD world. So how do the two mesh? Or
so honestly, both fields are very similar, but in just when we think of client based, it's just very different. So in clinical, we are more individualized based. So when we are doing assessments, when we are doing treatments, we're looking at from the individual perspective. Where I guess OD or organizational psychology, you're taking that same concept and applying it in a more systems level. You're applying it more in a perhaps group level. So everything, honestly, that I would think of from an individual perspective when I'm, working with children or young adults, I am actually applying it in an organizational standpoint, if that makes sense. So I am merging both systems. I am merging the individual and I'm merging the systems level and putting it together. And honestly, I thought I was going to have a really hard time because you don't really get a lot of clinical when we think of organizational psychology. We're thinking of those who have more of an HR background or more of a business background. So me coming into this field, I was like, whoa, maybe this wasn't the right field I should have pursued. But interestingly, I did find some students who already had a clinical background and were pretty much pursuing the same thing I was. So I am able to merge both of them because they're very similar in context, but it's just when it comes to applying the practices and the theories, it's different versus like an individual versus group or systems.
So I have a question. So like clinical, you like do diagnosis, right? And then you focus on the intervention specifically for that person for that diagnosis. How does that translate into like working with teams? Like, because each person may have not necessarily a DSM-5 diagnosis, but they may have their own individual thing that they're working through. So how do you do the interventions individually, but at a team's level? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I'll be quite honest, I think that's the biggest hurdle that I haven't been able to apply as of yet. But just like you said, how do I apply what I do individually, especially when it comes to diagnosis, assessments, or just anything of that nature? How do I apply it in groups? And I think, honestly, rather than looking at individuals within groups, you may want to look as an individual as a whole. How do they work together? How do they function? How do they adapt? How do they interact with each other? So I think looking from that perspective, you may get a better, form of diagnosis. You may get a better sense of them as a team or as a group, if that makes sense.
It'll be like a team diagnosis, and we have interventions based off of how we've diagnosed you as a team.
Right.
I
haven't tried it as of yet, but that's how I'm looking at it as of that nature.
I mean, that's how greatness happens, though. We have ideas, and then we start practicing stuff, and that didn't work out. Let's try something else. Oh, that worked out. Let's write a whole theory on that one, right? So. Yeah. Listen, practice away, come back and tell us how it works out. Okay.
I will definitely do that.
Yeah, no, I love it.
When you think about the clients and experiences you've had thus far, is there one that sticks out for you as something that was like, that cemented your like desire to continue down the OD road?
Yes. So I had a previous client. This is obviously within my work as in, BCBI and LADI. I had this specific client who I created a treatment plan for. I did the assessment. Everything was going great, but we could not have the buy-in from the mother. So we also have what we call parent training. So whatever we do within our clinic, such as implementing interventions, we also teach that to the parent. So we really didn't have the full buy-in from the parent. And obviously, if you don't have that buy-in from the parent, and whatever you implement in one setting and it's not being implemented in another setting, we call that behavior contrast. So the treatment itself is not going to be effective. And then because of that, our senior leadership team just decided to discharge. So when I think of it in an OD lens, I'm thinking of stakeholders in regards to this client. So if you're not able to have buy-in from the stakeholders. You're not able to have buy-in from maybe those who are related to the consumers. Your treatment is not going to be effective. You can be the practitioner who creates the treatment, it can be perfect to the T, but if you're not getting the buy-in from all of the players, it may definitely, affect the way that treatment is supposed to help the client or the consumer. So I tend to think of that, my experience, honestly, this happened, I want to say 3 weeks ago, how that could also be very realistic in an OD perspective. If you don't have other stakeholders, you don't have other buy-in from your employees, your followers, your leadership, those who are in the C-suite, you don't have that buy-in, you may not sustain. You may not be able to stay afloat.
Right. That is so true. Me and Latoya was just talking about how family is like the first organization and like how it translates over into like the leadership, like organizations, like your family is an organization. So the way you just described it is beautiful because it's so true. Like, I work in law enforcement, and we work with the guys that, they come home and they come home to the same environment where people are using drugs or people are stealing. So their organization structure is criminals. Right. And so while we're giving them these different things to help them change their lives and think differently, if the organization is still the same and they don't have the support, their behavior is the same. Yeah. And it's the same thing in organizations. Like we have leaders that, are corrupt or doing things that are inappropriate. But you have the staff that want to do right, want to, engage and be productive in whatever their jobs are. But how do you do that with the leadership is corrupt, right? So I don't think we'll ever go without a job, okay? Whether we work in medical or leadership, okay? Yeah. I think we'll always be employed.
Well, a segue, considering, there's so much job security in OD work, tell us a little bit about why or how you are planning to contribute to leadership psychology. I know you have, those newly minted letters, and your research is super interesting too, and how that I think will play into organizational, just like understanding especially for minority folks. So I won't give it away. I'll let you introduce the topic to folks.
Okay, so just a little background of what my research was. I mean, wow, it's very interesting to say that I did it, some weeks ago. So my research was called Racial Trauma Experienced by Black Employees and the Impact on Wellbeing and Work Performance. So what I, pretty much to sum it up, I was trying to present that racial trauma experienced by Black employees is more common than what we think it is. When we think of trauma itself, we think of especially racial trauma. Mind you, racial trauma is a fairly new terminology that just started to emerge within the last few years and really started to pick up. So when we think of racial trauma, we're thinking, oh my goodness, this Black employee has experienced blatant racism. They've experienced overt racism. Like it's this huge thing that's in your face. But interestingly, a lot of these racial trauma are happening or are more common because these Black employees are experiencing more subtle type of racism, more of microaggression. These are more common everyday experiences of Black employees. So no, it's not overt racism. No, it's not, blatant type of discrimination that's, so obvious. These are things that are happening more common. I don't want to get too much into it, but for an example, microaggression, if a Black employee, who just got hired in an organization and you have a, person outside of that race who comes in and says, wow, it's very interesting that you got this, mid-level manager position. I didn't think Black people can, or people of your race can be that, I'm just trying to make it up, that intellectual in that way. So maybe I'm just saying in more of a blatant way, but if this was done in a more subtle way, these are more common type of terms that are happening, they're experiencing racial trauma. And when a racial trauma occurs, there are changes in the brain that happens to these Black employees. And then you tend to see a lot of behaviors that occur that may appear to be, you know, they're trying to be intolerable, they're being difficult, but these are just natural responses and natural behaviors that Black people, you know, exhibit once they experience racial trauma. So one of the things that I found out is there's this term called calling in Black. And what that pretty much is that Black employees who have experienced racial trauma, whether it's, you know, direct exposure, indirect exposure. So indirect exposure could be an example of, you know, seeing police brutality against Black people in the media, right? That's still a form of they can experience racial trauma from that. So they call in Black, they're calling out of the organization. That could be taking medical leave, that could be just, you know, calling out sick or just using personal time. They are engaging in absenteeism, and that's, you know, costing the organization a lot of money. So these types of behaviors, like calling in Black, it's not done because they're trying to be intolerable or they just don't want to be that, you know, positive employee or organizational member. These are natural responses. They don't have the organizational resources to adapt and deal with these, you know, symptoms of racial trauma. So they are calling in Black. So that was one type of behavioral response that I was really looking at. Calling in Black is exhibited because of what they experience in the organization. But I was focusing more on internal events. So racial trauma that is, and, you know, I guess you can say negative racial encounters between organizational members and the organization, as opposed to just indirect, you know, experiences. So pretty much what I concluded is that organizational like leaders and, you know, consultants really need to start looking into developing organizational resources for these Black employees to utilize, or they are going to continue to experience absenteeism. So again, racial trauma is a thing. And I don't know if you guys have heard that I believe a few weeks ago, there were some Black employees from the White House. I think 8 or 10 of them had walked out, had quit because of negative racial encounters they've experienced in the White House. So these are just some examples to really highlight this is a thing. It's more common. We're just not talking about it. There's not actually a lot of research on it. So I'm really trying to like highlight that, bring it to the forefront, and just let others know that this is a reality for a lot of Black employees.
So one, I want to thank you for delving into such a heavy topic, right? And the emotional labor that goes into it is not missed on me. And I understand that, you know, I work in academia and have for most of my, you know, professional career. And I am no stranger to microaggressions. So I get it. I think what you have, you know, like highlighted for us today is significant. And I would be interested to know, like, if Black people and all people of color are seeing it maybe more persistent in other, like, depending on industry, I guess. But I want to first thank you for your research, and two, there again, back to the comment that led us here, job security for us all, right? As we try and make the workplace a better place for all people. I guess my follow-up question to this is, you said that you concluded that we need more resources. Are you thinking of creating some things? Maybe not? Well.
Yes, but I mean, it is, I don't know if organizations are ready for this. So overall, when we think of trauma, right, we have licensed professionals to, you know, provide support they create individualized treatment. I think organizations need to have something similar to that. It can't just be, oh, here is something for you to read, or here is this wellness fitness place you can go to. We need to actually have licensed professionals within organizations to deal with this, because this is a common thing. Are organizations ready to, one, accept that this is a thing occurring within the organization? That's something I don't know if, it comes with that reputation. They don't want to have a tarnished reputation. So before you can even invite these resources in, you have to accept that this is a thing that's occurring in your organization.
Right.
So again, I'm looking at how can you merge clinical and OD. These are some of the things I'm talking about.
I think where you start is bringing awareness, right?
Yes.
How we have all these different conferences, you can submit, your workshop. And so like going to different organizations that you can present this information to, and there'll be some directors that'll come to you and say, like, I think I'm having this issue. What do you suggest? Right. But just getting it out there so people start, because there are some people that want to change. Right. The whole organization may not want to change, but as the director of an organization, they're like, I need to bring this. I need to figure out how we can be a part of the change. Right. Because you bring awareness, then they have to accept what's happening, and then they're more open to the interventions. So I think you have an amazing start that can potentially change some organizations based off of what you create. But listen, I will send you some conferences that you can submit your work to.
I appreciate that.
Because this, especially in law enforcement, because I work in a predominantly African-American agency, but you still see that in those organizations. It doesn't just mean, it's us too, right? And so figuring out how to fix it for us too is important.
Yeah. I do want to add though, like another significant thing is really reframing how these diversity trainings are conducted. I feel like a lot of these diversity trainings or multiculturalism trainings are pretty much like a band-aid to the problem. You're just, we have this training, you're checking off the boxes, but are you really dealing with the root problem? Or are you just coming out to say, we have diversity trainings every 6 months, just to say that you're doing it. Yeah. So really reframing and restructuring how these trainings are conducted in organizations, I think is another key factor.
I think you bring up a significant point. I think a lot of, particularly in the last few years, I'd say we've seen an uptick in, tons of organizations doing diversity training work, whatever you want to call it. And I think for some, it is, just for the surface. It's to say that they did it, right?
Yep.
As you said earlier, to admit, we get caught up in comparing instead of in improving. And so if you see your peers are doing it, then you feel like you should be doing it too. And it may or may not be what you need to be doing. But I would say, particularly since the death of George Floyd, we have watched organizations of all kinds kind of put diversity out there and say it's something that's at the forefront. But I think you're right that a lot of people are putting it out there just to check a box, just to get their sticker, if you will, of approval, so that they can be a part of the group, right? The in crowd, if you will. And there is a need for more comprehensive equity and inclusion training, and not just diversity training, right? Like, we want our numbers to look a certain way. We want to say we did this thing, but if your employees don't feel that sense of belonging and don't feel like they are actually accepted in their workplace, then have you really done anything? Right.
I was talking to my uncle over the weekend, and he was like, it's not diversity and inclusion, it's diversity and openness. So, because I'm including you in what I'm doing, I'm including you into my space. I'm including you into what I'm already doing. So I'm not necessarily open to what you got going on. I'm going to include you in my greatness, right? Like, I'm not going to be a part of your greatness. I'm just going to include you. And I was like, oh my God, we need to do something with that, because it's true, right? We use these words, but as we use them, what they mean is not what we're trying to portray. So we need to look at the entire diversity and inclusion model and what we want people to take away. What is the results? And is this training going to actually do something? Or, like you said, we just checking boxes, put the stickers on our posters and say, I did it for the year. We'll see you again next year.
Yep.
But what are we doing consistently to implement what we trained on or what we brought awareness to, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. Everything you just said and more.
Yeah.
So, Gifty, we're coming to the end of our episode. We want to give you the last word. Is there 1, 2, 3, whatever you decide, things that you think people should know, either about your research and or your journey as a doctoral student?
I think I just want to end with saying not everything is a trend. Not everything should be a trend. Not everything is a viral content. So what I mean by that is, again, going back to what we were saying, organizations just kind of jumped on that trend, especially with the death of George Floyd, to say, yep, we're doing these, trainings, we're doing these, workshops. It became a trend, but weren't really looking at the underlying root issues. So again, not everything is a trend. Are you really, do you really want to better your organization? Do you really want to support your employees, your followers in the organization? So don't just do it because it's a trend, it's something trendy and everyone's doing it and you want to look good. Just maintain your truth, so not everything is a trend.
Well put. Well put. Thank you. We've enjoyed our conversation with you this morning, and we hope to have you back.
Thank you.
Thank you.